Obviously, this moment is very portentous and necessitates, obviously, a lot of different actors coming together. But since I've taken my position in May of this year, I've met, obviously, many Syrians. And one thing has struck me and has always been clear is that despite 14 years of stalemate, they never gave up hope for an inclusive and comprehensive accountability for their victimization. That hope now appears to be closer than ever to being realized. And hopefully the IIIM can fulfill its mandate, which is to play a part in that accountability process. First off, I think it might be useful for me to go over a little bit of our mandate. What is the IIIM? We were created by a resolution of the General Assembly in 2016 to collect, preserve, consolidate, and analyze evidence of serious crimes committed in Syria since March 2011. We have an open-ended mandate, and we have a mandate to investigate the commission or the evidence of commission of these crimes, regardless of perpetrator groups. We've been doing so, and essentially in two ways. As I said, collecting that evidence. We have now over 283 terabytes of data that we've accumulated. And we have been using that data and generating our own to fulfill the mandate of supporting current and future jurisdictions. That's our mandate. Obviously, the idea was that eventually there would be some kind of comprehensive Syria accountability. And in the meantime, we were to support jurisdictions who have, through the use of universal jurisdictions, investigated and prosecuted these crimes. Indeed, over the course of the life of the IIIM, we've received over 400 requests for assistance from 16 different jurisdictions, representing over 230 separate investigations all over the world of these crimes committed in Syria by various actors. These investigations have led to prosecutions, trials, and verdicts. I'm happy to say that we've been able to answer and support over 210, I think, of these requests with actual evidence, as well as analytical products. And our contribution to these accountability processes have been recognized by several jurisdictions. In the meantime, and parallel to that, we have been preparing for a future accountability process by developing specific lines of inquiries across different topics and different lines of inquiry to develop a structural, based on a structural investigation and comprehension of these crimes. That process and that data, obviously, has been gathered through various sources, most significantly from Syrian civil society, who from the very beginning have been documenting, oftentimes at the risk of their lives, their victimization. We've also gathered data in partnership with different national and international actors. And we have been working alongside our partners who have complementary mandate, such as the Special Envoy, the Commission of Inquiry, OPCW, and now the IIIM. Now, since the events of the last, 12 days, 13 days, we've been developing a response to these rapidly unfolding and still very much fluid events and situation. And to do so, we have, among other things, developing or using our close contact network of sources, both inside and outside Syria, and those who have contacts inside Syria, trusted sources. We've been in contact with over 20 of them and maintaining that contact to get an accurate picture of what's happening. We obviously want to, we have also developed a coordination with these partners, international partners here in Geneva that I've mentioned. And we've noted a few things, and we've established a few things. Obviously, at the first 48 hours of the situation as it unfolded, especially in Damascus, was very chaotic. And there were, and we have seen, all of us, I think, evidence of loss of evidence or potential evidence, quite clearly. Some of that is normal in any of these situations, and especially at the pace that these events unfolded, quite understandable. What we have, however, also noted with hope, is a stated awareness from the transitional authorities and from Syrian civil society actors of the need to preserve evidence. When you're talking about a government, a state apparatus, who for 14 years used every aspect of that apparatus to commit crimes, you will have a massive amount of documentation left behind. That certainly was my experience, for example, in Cambodia. So that awareness of the need to preserve evidence is hopeful. We also have noted that several national actors and also international actors have offered to help in the current situation, to help the transitional authorities to preserve that evidence. And we're certainly hoping that these efforts will continue and will have the sufficient resources to impact the situation in a positive way. We also know that that situation varies from government to government, and we are trying to keep track of those different situations across the country. Part of which, we all need to be reminded, is still very much under an armed conflict. So it's a very delicate and fluid situation. There is, however, the potential in this now accessible crime scene, or maybe I should say interlocking series of crime scenes. There is now the possibility of accessing evidence of the highest level of regime and allied crimes responsibility. There's also now, as we've seen, the very poignant image, the possibility to finally establish the fate of tens of thousands of Syrians who were illegally arrested and detained and suffered, for some of them, years of violence inside the prison system, which we have documented the Friday before last in a report that we've published. Finally, I think also what should be noted is that the situation now offers a multiplicity of opportunities for witnesses, insider witnesses, among others, and also suspects that we know, of whom we know, some of them, and who will also come to light, I think. Those opportunities will, of course, give rise to investigative opportunities, and for both us and also jurisdictions. In the past week, we've received at least 4 different requests for assistance from jurisdictions because of these opportunities. You will no doubt understand that, for example, if a jurisdiction had for some years now an open file on crimes committed by agents of the regime with no possibility of gathering evidence, that file was probably put on the side for a while, but now has been reactivated. So we expect an increased demand from jurisdictions for our support based on the current events. Now, our key priority is preservation, right? Or it should be the key priority of everyone. Ideally, everything should be left in sight, preserved and secured with limited access and no movement. However, given the circumstances, it's possible that things need to be moved. And if that's the case, the key is to document every single step of that intervention and to make sure that it's fully documented for eventual evidence. Lastly, we do have indeed a role to play because preservation is our bread and butter. This is what we know how to do and we are equipped to do and mandated and created to do. So we very much hope to have a role into this process. I should note that the Syrian government, since our creation, denied our legitimacy. And despite our try to contact our letters every year to engage with them, those letters were never answered. We have just now, following the events, reiterated through a communication to the Syrian missions our willingness to engage and to go to Syria to fulfill our mandate. We are awaiting a response, and as soon as that response is forthcoming, we will deploy. Lastly, I just want to emphasize how important accountability is in this transition process. Syrians from the beginning, as I said, have never wavered in their commitment for accountability. I was very grateful for the statements of the commissioners from the Commission of Inquiry, the Special Envoy Peterson, states, and others about the need for accountability in any of this process, and that this process, this must be Syrian-led if it's asked any chance of helping Syria transition to a rule of law-based society. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, SG Petit. There are many. I just wanted to say Mr. Petit is Canadian, so he can answer your questions in French. I know some of you will do ask that in French, so and I'll start with RFI.
Bonjour Monsieur Petit. Effectivement, j'ai posé les questions en français. Je vais peut-être pas vous reposer la question si vous avez pris contact avec HTS, parce que vous venez de le dire. Vous avez envoyé une lettre, j'ai cru comprendre. Vous demandez simplement, est-ce que vous avez reçu de nouvelles preuves dans les 12 jours qui viennent de se dérouler? Est-ce que vous avez reçu quelque chose en particulier? Est-ce que vous avez commencé à recevoir de nouveaux témoignages? Et je voudrais savoir si, globalement, ce qu'on a vu, les scènes de libération de la prison de Senaïa, etc., vous avez publié un rapport quelques jours seulement avant la chute du régime d'Assad. Est-ce que déjà, ce rapport, vous l'avez publié plus vite à cause des événements? Est-ce que c'était prévu le timing? Et qu'est-ce que ça change finalement la chute du régime? Qu'est-ce que vous ne saviez pas qu'on a vu ces derniers 12 jours, après les multiples rapports et tout ce qu'on sait depuis des années? Qu'est-ce que vous ne saviez pas que vous avez appris dans les quelques jours qui viennent de se terminer? Et puis sur la destruction des preuves, vous l'avez dit, vous dites c'est normal dans les premiers jours, dans une situation comme ça, que des preuves soient détruites. Est-ce qu'aujourd'hui vous avez l'assurance que c'est terminé, qu'il n'y a plus de preuves qui sont encore détruites par les rebelles qui s'emparent des lieux de pouvoir?
Oui, merci. Une partie de notre réponse aux événements, ça a été de créer une cellule qui monitore, si c'est français, vous m'excuserez, qui monitore les médias sociaux. C'est une des choses que l'on est capable et qu'on est très bon à faire et qu'on voulait aussi essayer d'éviter la duplication. Donc, ce monitoring-là nous a permis effectivement d'identifier beaucoup d'avenues potentielles de nouvelles preuves. On a tous vu des vidéos là, des gens qui vont dans les bureaux, qui montrent des documents, etc. Donc, ça fait certainement partie et nous avons aussi, comme je vous dis, en contact avec nos sources, nous avons confirmation que beaucoup d'entre ces sources-là, qui sont sur place, ont pu déjà prendre possession d'éléments de preuve. Bien inclus aussi des nouveaux témoignages. Comme je vous dis, ça va être possible, effectivement. Le rapport, j'aimerais pouvoir dire que nous savions ce qui était pour arriver. C'est pour ça que nous avons publié le moment où on l'a fait. C'était plus une coïncidence. C'est un rapport qui a pris presque 2 années à faire et qui est effectivement extrêmement important et qu'on espère qu'il va pouvoir être utile. Quant à la question de savoir si on a découvert quelque chose, je pense que pour moi... Bon, nous avons quand même 8 ans presque d'expérience dans documenter les crimes qui se commettent en Syrie. Factuellement, je vous dirais peut-être pas, mais pour moi, je pense que c'est de visualiser l'horreur de l'impact des crimes sur les victimes là, qui sortent des centres de détention et les familles qui sont réunies, ou encore pire, les familles qui finalement, malgré leur espoir, constatent que leurs membres de famille sont disparus. Je pense que c'est plus ça qui nous a frappés. Et finalement, j'aimerais clarifier, nous avons été en contact, nous avons envoyé une lettre à la représentation du gouvernement syrien à Genève et à New York. Je voudrais être clair, nous avons été en contact avec les représentations officielles du gouvernement syrien. Merci.
Oui.
Oh, pardon. Oui, effectivement, extrêmement important. Non, nous n'avons aucune assurance que ça cesse et au contraire, nous avons toujours des informations que cela continue. Cependant, comme je le disais, il y a un messaging qui est encourageant des autorités transitionnelles. Nous savons qu'ils prennent des mesures pour contrôler là où ils le peuvent. L'accès et la perte, c'est loin d'être parfait et il va y avoir besoin de beaucoup plus de support et d'acteurs pour que ce soit de manière compréhensive. Et encore là, ça varie d'endroit à endroit. Donc, il y a beaucoup à faire encore pour préserver ce qui reste, parce que certains éléments ont clairement été détruits.
SGPT, sorry, there is a question, just a very detailed question on the chat. If you could please repeat the figure. You said 283 terabytes of data.
Yes, that's correct. 283 terabytes of data.
Okay. So I'll continue with the question. There are many. Gunilla von Hall, Svenska Dagbladet.
Thanks. Thanks. Hi, here, Gunilla von Hall, Swedish, Svenska Dagbladet. When you talk about the loss of evidence, could you be a bit more elaborate on that, a bit more concretely? What kind of evidence have been lost? What do you know about that? And when it comes to preservation, we now have the news about the mass grave, about 100,000 bodies. How do you expect that to be preserved as a site to be investigated? You also said that you're ready to go when you get the clearance. What do you mean by that? Are you going in with a team? How many? What are you expected to do concretely when you get to Syria? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I think what kind of evidence lost? I think of any kind. We've had reports and we've seen as well, right? Papers strewn all over the floor, people leaving with computers, hard drives burnt and smashed. So I think there's obviously has been a loss. How significant that loss is, it's very early to say. There is, like I said, there is a need for concerted effort for everyone. And perhaps to answer your third question, part of that, we hope to be part of that effort. In terms of who and when and where, it's still too early to determine. But significantly, obviously, rather, our first priority would be to go and try and scope the extent of the issue. See exactly what is available in terms of access and potential evidence, and then see how we could best assist in preserving that, and then eventually targeting specific source of evidence for different needs.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's very.
And in terms of the mass graves, that is, a very complicated, important area. And we would certainly could assist in some of that process, but it's a very specialized process if you're talking about documenting it for criminal purposes. But obviously there is the competing and perhaps sometimes overriding necessity to bring answers to victims that can override that need to preserve evidence from criminal proceedings. So again, this has to be Syrian-centered and would have to be done in conjunctions with various actors.
Nina Larsson, AFP. There.
Yeah. Thank you for taking my question. Just to follow up quickly on that, on the mass graves. Hi. Just wondering, in your gathering of evidence over the years, if you have an estimate of how many mass graves we can expect to find in Syria, if you have any thoughts on what might be found. And then I had two other questions. One was about yesterday when Mr. Peterson went to the Sandaia prison. There was someone throwing bricks at the car and yelling that the UN was coming too late. I'm just wondering concerns around that the international community is going to face coming in and trying to investigate when it comes to the fact that this has been going on for so long. And then finally, the Swiss federal court is considering dropping the case against Assad's uncle. And I'm just wondering if you have thoughts on the wisdom of doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the mass graves, that's obviously been part of our documentation effort through the years. We certainly have significant reason to believe of a certain number of them and location of them, but that's something obviously that's not for at this stage anyways for up to discussions in public. I have to hasten that, as I said, mass graves are a very specific type of crime site. The excavation of it, exhumation of it, for criminal purposes requires a lot of resources if you want to be able to get DNAs or identity, cause of death, etc., especially if you're talking about hundreds or perhaps thousands of bodies. So those are very complex issues that, in my experience anyways, sometimes takes years to address. In terms of the reaction of some to Mr. Pedersen's visit to Sandaia, it's not for me to judge or to try and put in perspective what sentiments are expressed by doing this from somebody who's lived through potentially what all the victimization that we know occurred. It's certainly a sentiment that I've seen in other places where I've worked. And obviously, if the crime has been committed, it's already too late, right? It's always too late. So I think right now, the call of the international community to the international community has been heard, has been responded. You've seen statements from the UN, multiple international actors, multiple states, regional bodies. Everybody is conscious that their needs now that we have access, which wasn't possible before, 13 days ago again, now that we have access, I think there is a real expression of commitment to helping Syria rebuild, and we're certainly hoping to be part of that. And in terms of the Swiss case, I have no comment on an ongoing criminal case.
Yuria Prelev, RIA Novosti.
Merci, je vais poser mes questions en français aussi. Ma première question, vous avez expliqué que vous suiviez sur les réseaux sociaux toutes les vidéos publiées depuis le renversement du régime d'Assad. Il y a des dizaines de vidéos montrant des exécutions de soldats et d'officiers de l'armée syrienne. Est-ce que vous les documentez, majoritairement par des membres de Hayat Tahrir al-Sham? Et ma seconde question, c'est par rapport à M. Joulani. Il a été, puisque vous suivez depuis 2016 la situation en Syrie, le chef de HTS. Vous suivez depuis 2016 la situation. Il a été le chef de Jabhat al-Nusra, puis de Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Ils ont eux aussi commis des crimes de guerre, ils ont commis des attentats, ils ont tué des civils, ils ont tué des soldats. Est-ce que vous allez continuer les investigations sur eux, et quelles sont les chances qu'ils vous laissent continuer vos investigations en Syrie, sachant que c'est eux qui dirigent aujourd'hui la situation politique là-bas?
Merci. Aux deux questions, je vais simplement vous répondre que nous sommes un mécanisme qui décharge son mandat de manière impartiale. Nous l'avons fait depuis le début et nous l'avons continué de le faire. Nous avons un mandat pour accumuler les preuves de crimes commis depuis mars 2011 et sans date de fin, sans date end date, pardon, et nous avons continué de le faire. Et de la manière, comme je le dis, impartiale. Maintenant, quant à savoir si j'ai bien compris votre question, si nous aurons accès aux preuves ou au territoire, ou etc., ça reste hypothétique et, on verra. Merci.
La question plus précisément, c'est de savoir, est-ce que vous avez des preuves qui pourraient impliquer la participation de M. Djoulani à des crimes que vous avez documentés?
Je le répète, nous menons notre mandat de manière impartiale. Nous avons le mandat d'enquêter sur tous les crimes commis. Nous n'avons pas un mandat d'enquêter sur une personne en particulier, mais sur des crimes. Donc, nous rassemblons des éléments de manière impartiale et complète sur les crimes qui ont pu être commis. C'est la réponse à votre question.
Emma Farge, Reuters.
Good morning. I wanted to ask what information you have on the perpetrators of crimes. Have many of them fled? And if so, where to? And do you have a message for those jurisdictions where they currently are? And secondly, could you say more about the jurisdictions that have been in touch? You said 4 had been in touch over the past few days. Can you elaborate? Thank you.
Maybe I'll start with the last one. No, I can't, because obviously we support ongoing criminal investigation, and the cornerstone of that is confidentiality. Now, in terms of specific individuals and their whereabouts, we obviously, through the years, have accumulated a long list of names of individuals of interests. We are also aware of reports, some of which we have confirmed, of individuals who have fled the jurisdiction. There's a very prominent one that yesterday came in with a statement. So we are obviously aware of that, and we'll be monitoring the situation, and both in terms of our own investigation and in response, obviously, to requests for assistance. Thank you.
So we can continue a little bit more. I've got 3 questions online, and then we will wrap up. Jamie Keaton, Associated Press.
Thank you, Alessandra, and thank you, Mr. Petit, for coming to see us. I have a few questions, I'm sorry. I first wanted to know whether or not you have any contact with HTS, and do you have any signs that they will be cooperative with regard to your efforts to communicate with them? There's a UN team in Damascus, as you know, and I wanted to just know, is anyone pushing your case with the de facto leaders there? The second question is about the number of jurisdictions. You mentioned 4, but you also said that some have already prosecuted cases based on, in part, on IIIM data. Can you tell us which ones those are, please? And are you not concerned that the ICC has not yet gotten involved? And would you favor the ICC taking up these cases? And finally, a quick question: the list of suspects. At what point could we see a list of suspects? Will we have to wait for, because I know that these names are under lock and key. One of the colleagues mentioned Al-Gilani, but also government side. When can we ever see the light of day on the names of these suspects? Thank you.
Thank you. We've, as I said, we've been in contact with the representations of the Syrian government here. We've also made contact formally and informally, rather, with local contacts, including, obviously, UN contacts, to try and establish channels of communications, which we're hopeful will eventually lead to, among other things, agreement for us to deploy. In terms of the number of the jurisdictions, first of all, as I mentioned, we support investigation and prosecution that are by nature confidential. But some of those jurisdictions have allowed us to acknowledge our cooperation with them and our assistance with them. Several of them: Belgium, France, Sweden, the U.S., and others. I think should be on our website somewhere. Have acknowledged our assistance, including in the recent case in France, where my predecessor testified and where a judgment was issued against 4 individuals. In terms of the ICC, as you know, the ICC does not have jurisdictions over Syria because Syria is not a member of the ICC. There are pathways by which the Syrian situation could be referred to the ICC. That was attempted way back in 2014, I believe, at the Security Council, and vetoed by Russia at the time, and also, I believe, China. But there is that pathway. However unlikely it is. There are other pathways. What we do have to remember is that if indeed the ICC is seized of the Syrian situation, as it is, by the way, from the Libyan situation for, 13 years now, I think, there are, it's a very limited jurisdiction, and would, if you're talking about the situation that lasted 13 years with a whole state involved, it's a very substantive situation that needs to be addressed, and ICC could be a part of this. In terms of favoring it or not, I would simply say that any measure of accountability for what has happened in Syria must be favored, and hopefully, as I said, Syrian-led and Syrian coordinated. Eventually, lastly, list of suspects. Again, I would be a very poor former prosecutor if I was to publish list of suspects before jurisdictions would have them in their custody.
Indeed. Mohammed Aslan, Anadolu Ansi, the Turkish news agency.
So thank you for the brief. As you know, the reconstruction of Syria is very important for the normalization of country and the permanent solution of the problem. Do you think that increasing aid and investments in Syria will accelerate this process? And what kind of planning should there be in this term?
Just maybe before I give the floor to Mr. Petit, we will have more about the humanitarian situation in a moment at the briefing. But maybe if you have something to say.
Not much. I'm going to stick to my lane, which is prosecuting international crimes. But just to say, to me, accountability is reconstruction. Accountability is part of it, and I would hope that the investments, among other things, in the structural aspects of accountability, which is law courts, police, etc., would be part of that as well.
Absolutely. Maya Plants, the UN brief, and that will be our last question.
Yes, thank you very much for taking my question, Alessandra. Mr. Petit, my question is related to the digital forensics. If you want to make a commentary, my questions are: how large is your team of digital forensics? How do you work with social media platforms? You mentioned you have already 283 terabytes of data, and this seems quite small compared, thinking of the time frame, 12 years or so of this event. And is there adequate funding, as these investigations, forensic digital investigations, are expensive? Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have a large digital team. We have a very small digital team. And that's due to the fact that we are a small entity in terms of the tasks ahead, and the fact that also, like everybody else in the UN system and international community, we've been hit hard by the financial crisis. However, we do, as you said, monitor social media, and we will, among other things, and it's something that we've been very good at. You say 283 terabytes is a small part. That's the first time I've heard that. Usually people are quite impressed by that number. But in fact, you are right in some ways, because we could have collected a lot more. The idea is not to vacuum up anything that's out there. The idea, if you're in the business of accountability, is to pick and choose the best evidence possible. So part of what we do is that to target our resources once we've analyzed the situation to the best possible leads and source of evidence. And that's what we intend to do, as I just mentioned earlier, if and when we go to Syria, is to target collection opportunities. And finally, adequate funding, not even close. We, as I said, been as well hit by the situation before these events. Right now, we have to pivot very fast to a completely new situation that will require substantial additional funding from any source, certainly from the regular budget and from voluntary contribution from states, if we want to be able to address now the situation and then in a sustainable manner in the future. The idea is to have the resources to collect and preserve the evidence now, and then be able to exploit it in the years ahead for these future accountability processes that right now can run the gamut from an international process to a completely national one and anything in between. So we need to be able to ramp up and be able to address the situation with that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Petit. There are more questions, but Ouda Abu Zaid, as you know, takes care of the IIIM press contact. So please ask her in writing. Mr. Petit will be able to answer you later on. Thank you very much for this briefing. Please keep us informed of how it goes.
With pleasure.
Thank you for briefing the Geneva Press Corps.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Ouda. And please stay because we have many more guests, and we'll just stop 1 minute and continue with the regular